of momentum, and lucky for us, we have ways that we can measure some of that momentum, especially over the past few years. That's why I've got CNN political director David Chalian here with us to dive a little bit deeper into what we've got here. So can you just take us through the district where Governor Tim Walz served when he was in Congress?
I will get there, but just before we get here, I just want to show you, this is a recent poll just out August 4th here, NPR PBS Marist poll about the opinion of Governor Walz. This is overall among Americans, okay? 71% have no opinion. That's how largely unknown Tim Walz is to the American people. That's going to change. That number is going to come down a lot over the next 92 days. What matters here is, what do these numbers look like in 92 days, right? So as he becomes more well-known, is it with a favorable impression or an unfavorable impression? And Omar, let me just show you also here what that is among Democrats, because what I showed you there was among everyone. Among Democrats, he's very favorable versus unfavorable, 31% favorable, 7% unfavorable, but still even among Democrats, more than 6 in 10 Democrats have no opinion of him. That he is really known in Minnesota, not really well known that much out of Minnesota. So that is why there's going to be a battle to define him now as the race goes forward. To your question about his district, this is from 2022. He was not running for the House, obviously, in 2022. But if you take here a look here in the 1st Congressional District, you see here the Republican congressman, he won by what is that? 11 points, 11 and a half percentage points. It has gotten more Republican over the years since Tim Walz represented this district. But when he won this district back in 2006, he defeated an incumbent Republican congressman by more than 5 points. It was a Republican-leaning district then as well, and Tim Walz was able to win it.
And so I know we talked about 2022. Is there anything that we can learn from the governor's race in 2022 that might apply here?
Yes. So let's go back into Minnesota here. This is what the governor's race was for his reelect. Okay. He won here 52.3% to 44.6%. About 7.5 points or so there is what he won by. He actually had a bigger margin of victory in his initial run in 2018. Mm-hmm. It was a bigger Democratic year than 2022 was, but he still wins re-election with a very healthy margin and considerably more votes than the Republican did there. And when you look at that, you just say, and I'm going to just pull out here, and if I can get to the 2020 presidential map, here's Minnesota, right? Yeah. So, when you look at this blue wall here of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, these 3 states have a lot of similarity with Minnesota, especially Michigan and Wisconsin. I can imagine, Omar, given Walz's success in winning over a place like Minnesota, we're going to see him for the next 92 days parked in that line of blue wall states.
So let's stay there here. What is that crossover appeal? Do you think he can help Kamala Harris solidify some of those states, or will he be seen as too progressive by some?
There's no doubt that Republicans are going to argue that he is a radical lefty liberal. They're starting to do it already. And there is a progressive record that he has with the Democratic legislature in Minnesota, where he signed a lot of progressive bills into law. He's going to wear a lot of that as a badge of honor, of course. But the Republicans are going to try to paint him that way. The reality is his electoral success in Minnesota has been at the hands of not just unifying Democrats, but winning over independents and some Republicans as well. That's what he and Harris hopes he will translate to the more critical states they need to win this election.
And then, of course, the big question was Pennsylvania and whether this would move the needle in some ways in Pennsylvania or help Kamala Harris win it. Josh Shapiro was obviously, we knew, in the running here. Is there any sense that the Trump camp is breathing a sigh of relief that it's not Josh Shapiro? I'm wondering how that side is interpreting the news that we've got.
Well, every Republican I was talking to in the days leading up to this really thought that Shapiro would pose a strong pick for Harris and concern to them because of Pennsylvania and its 19 electoral votes. Now, had Shapiro been the pick, Omar, no guarantee that the Democratic ticket would have won Pennsylvania. Yes, he's a very popular incumbent governor there. But what she went with here was somebody that obviously she feels very comfortable joining as a governing partner should they win, thinking about working with him for the next 4 or 8 years in the White House, and somebody that she thinks can appeal to a whole swath of Americans, not just playing for one state, but hopefully across this whole Midwest region.
Well, it was Veep stakes for weeks to this point. Now we have our answer. Now the campaigning begins. Yeah. Dave Chalian, really appreciate it. Thanks. Brianna?
All right, joining us now is David Plouffe. In his first interview since he became senior advisor to the Harris-Walz campaign, David, of course, served as a senior advisor in the Obama White House and was campaign manager for the Obama 2008 campaign. David, great to have you. And this is a huge day. Walz, of course, was very moderate in Congress. He represented a district that certainly was more conservative than he was before and after. Then he did adopt more progressive policies as governor. Do you think that makes him appealing across the spectrum, or could it turn off some moderate Republicans that he's shifted left?
Well, Brianna, he's shown great electoral strength, winning his House district, as you mentioned, that's a Trump 15 district, and winning twice in very comfortable fashion in Minnesota, which is not a deep blue state. But listen, what he did as governor, the first state to ensure constitutional protections after Roe v. Wade got overturned by Donald Trump's court, passing the largest tax cut in Minnesota history aimed at middle class and working families, paid medical leave, capping the cost of insulin. These are seen as mainstream, extraordinarily popular accomplishments. And I think they dovetail very nicely with both Kamala Harris's record and what she's promising to do as president. So I think he's going to be a huge asset. He can campaign anywhere in the country. I think he's got a skill as a communicator, and he's accomplished real things for working people in Minnesota.
We pay so much attention to these picks. There is some debate, obviously, about whether they move the needle. And certainly we've heard recently from Trump where he said that it does not. Do you think that Harris picking Walz will move the needle for her in a positive way?
Well, Brianna, pretty telling that Donald Trump, just weeks after his announcement, is basically trying to suggest the most important decision he's made so far in this campaign doesn't matter. So pretty remarkable. So listen, history suggests, and I've been through this personally, this is about the top of the ticket. Most voters are going to vote based on their views of Harris and Trump and who they think is going to be better for their family and their future. But the vice president does have an important role. First of all, if you make a mistake, historically, that's where it's made the biggest impact. And, right now, J.D. Vance is the least popular vice presidential choice this soon after being picked in American political history. Pretty extraordinary. They need to do well in the debate, assuming J.D. Vance actually debates. Trump looks like he wants to be a coward and run. But if Vance debates, you'll want Tim Walz to do well in that debate. I think he can. To campaign hard in every corner of every state. And that can help because it's another person, particularly I think Walz's background. He's got, and I think this is what makes him good as a governing partner. He's got DC experience, was the ranking member on the Veterans Affairs Committee, but also experience as a governor. Kamala Harris also has state experience. What's interesting, by the way, the Trump-Vance ticket, the only public service experience they have is in Washington. Interesting coming from the person who likes to talk about the swamp. So I think he's really able to talk about, hey, I've been in a state. I've seen what these policies can matter. Kamala Harris has the right vision for America, but I think he's going to be very compelling. And listen, campaigns are about a lot of things, the right policy, the right message, the right allocation of resources, but it's also about the performance of your principles. And I think Kamala Harris is off to an extraordinarily strong start in that regard. And I think Tim Walz is going to really light it up there in the 7 battleground states and the 2nd congressional district of Nebraska.
He may have a vulnerability in the response to the protests and riots that we saw in Minnesota. The bipartisan Minnesota Senate report found that Walz and the Minneapolis mayor failed to realize the seriousness of the riots and failed to act in a timely manner to confront rioters with necessary force. I also want you to listen to something that J.D. Vance had to say about this very thing this morning.
They make an interesting tag team because, of course, Tim Walz allowed rioters to burn down Minneapolis in the summer of 2020, and then the few who got caught, Kamala Harris helped bail them out of jail. So it is more instructive for what it says about Kamala Harris, that she doesn't care about the border, she doesn't care about crime, she doesn't care about American energy, and most importantly, she doesn't care about the Americans who have been made to suffer under those policies.
What is your response to that line of questioning, specifically related to the response in Minnesota?
Well, listen, Governor Walz has spoken to this and he'll continue to speak to it. Obviously, that was an unprecedented situation. And I think on balance, he handled that as well as we could. It was a moving event. By the way, much better than Donald Trump, who basically incited Americans, didn't bring us together and threatened to bring in the military. Number one. Number two, every time I hear J.D. Vance, he does remind me of someone, which is kind of, I think, endemic of this modern Republican Party. Their talking points, what they say, they're only used to being in their own little soft, protected, cuddly bubble of Fox News and Sinclair Broadcasting and these other outlets. And so the things they say don't comport with the things Americans believe, or I think who Americans are going to see Kamala Harris as. Energy, America's obviously, succeeding on all fronts. In terms of energy production. And she's going to double down on that, kind of an all of the above as we make that important transition to alternative energy. So, I think J.D. Vance is someone who's a flawed messenger. And I'm excited both about what Tim Walz is going to be able to do to support Kamala Harris when they campaign together and separately, but also that matchup for people, because this choice, it does say something about Kamala Harris and Donald Trump in terms of all the people in their party. Who could they have picked? By the way, Donald Trump is the oldest nominee in American political history now. So it's a fair question to ask. Is J.D. Vance the kind of person you'd want to succeed him? I think the question so far is unequivocally no. And is he going to be an asset on the campaign trail? And I think so far the answer is no. I think Tim Walz could be an excellent governing partner to Kamala Harris and a real asset here